Happy Friday, everybody. We are back for another exciting episode of the Tech Behind FinTech. Joining me today is Medina Williams. She is a return guest. Welcome back to the show. Happy to have you on again.
Thanks for having me again.
Every time Medina comes down, we talk about fraud, but this time, fraud, unemployment, and machine learning went into a bar. Can we guess what's going to happen next? A lot of people fail to guess it. Even I was guilty of being one of those people. But listen, before we get into the show, we have to read Medina's bio. Although she's a returning guest, some of our new audience members may not be familiar with her. So let's get on with the reading of the bio like we always do. Medina Williams is a certified fraud examiner and doctoral student in technology at Purdue University. Medina has various years of private and public sector experience in the fields of financial institutions, shipbuilding, and hospitals. She currently works as a business analyst at a management consulting firm. Medina is fascinated by tech advances, particularly in financial services, but always looks for the trade-offs and vulnerabilities. Love it.
Yep. You always have to
So,
tell both sides of the story.
you always have to tell both sides of the story. I absolutely love that. So, if you're just joining us, my name is Nnamdi Osuagwu. This is the Tech Behind FinTech, where we talk about really the technology behind money. So love the topic, and this is what we dive into the technology side. So, with like we do every Friday, before we jump into the topic of the day, we're just going to go over some current events that happened in the week, and then we will jump into the topic of the day. Friday, shoot me a comment. Let me know that you're listening, so I know that we are not alone right now. Yeah. So it's always a good thing, and I love our viewers and and the comments and the back and forth. So the first news topic of the day: AMC up 2,300%. Bonkers. The Reddit guys, man, they are on it.
Meme stocks.
Hey, I look, I, I, um, I'm not knocking the hustle. I think at all. I remember AMC a few months ago when it was like $4. Then I might have played with it for a second, then dumped
Ah,
it, but then it went to 9, then it went down. This 2,300% is like, it's insane. It's crazy. This year, 2,300%. It's crazy.
right. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, AMC is taking the long game and leveraging the opportunity that's in front of them. Can you blame them?
I can't. They said what happened? Let me read something right here. The proposal announced Thursday in the following. We put to a vote at Thursday's July annual meeting. Their capital. Wait, hold up. It was something that they're trying to do. The equity would be valued at 1.3 billion, though the company promised not to issue new shares. They want to issue new shares until 2021. In a YouTube interview Thursday, Aaron said, I think the CEO, proceeds from another equity sale, if approved, would be used to reduce debt, help the company negotiate with landlords who are owed 400 million, and to chase acquisitions, quote unquote, hard. Oh man, that and GameStop, man. Oh, I love it. I find it absolutely hilarious. Okay, moving right along to the next news article. Uh, Google will let crypto wallets run ads. So historically, you were unable to run ads if you were an exchange or additional coin offering, but that will be changing. Let me look at some of the show notes. In 2018, Google barred ads from cryptocurrencies and related products, following a similar move from Facebook. But Google soon peeled back that restriction for digital currency exchanges. Starting in August, Google will let wallets run ads on search, YouTube, and other properties as long as they go through the company's certification process. Google is making the change in order to better match existing FinCEN regulations and requirements, a spokesperson said. What are
Yeah.
your thoughts?
So that last line, the FinCEN regulations line, is really the story for me.
Okay.
I think it's the big data and putting all the pieces together and connecting the dots, because we know crypto is ripe for fraud, and that's been in the news lately. So I think that's a driving factor, especially that last sentence there.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Speaking and a last thing interesting that you mentioned that. So in UK, crypto firms failing to meet FCA's money laundering regulations. The UK market regulators say significant number of crypto firms are withdrawing applications to register with the watchdog after struggling to meet its anti-money laundering standards. A significantly high number of businesses are not meeting the required standards under the money laundering regulations, resulting in an unprecedented number of businesses withdrawing their applications, the Financial Conduct Authority said. So also the FCA said it is extending the end date of its temporary registrations regime for existing crypto asset businesses from July 9th, 2021 to March 31st, 2022. The process is designed to allow companies to continue to trade while their applications are being processed. I know you have a strong opinion on that. I'd like to hear what your thoughts are.
I do. I think with a lot of these firms and the inventions of crypto, you want to hurry up and develop the product and get it to launch, but regulations are a very heavy lift and something that I think tend to get thought of rather in the background. However, you can see they're definitely a showstopper.
Yeah, for sure. So the big question of the day: unemployment, fraud, and machine learning went to a bar. What happens next, Medina?
So let's set the scene and start with the unemployment. Of
Okay.
course, the pandemic being in the natural experiment that it is, we've lost a lot of jobs in the economy. So you've had a lot of people, seeking those unemployment benefits. So there's been unprecedented demand on the system of people seeking that coverage. So you have fraud already probably present in the system, but more so, you're going to have a lot of these, as I call them, these vulnerability entrepreneurs that are trying to get in and on this windfall and this free money that's available. So that's the kind of scene I want to set with the unemployment insurance benefits. And what we've seen in a lot of the states is an effort to get those benefits to their citizens a lot sooner. They're kind of lowering some of their controls. Some of them have normally had waiting periods for citizens seeking benefits, so they could kind of be in the background doing these verifications. But COVID is definitely, one of those black swan events. So the trade-offs that the states had to face, whether it be kind of a type 1 or a type 2 era, false positive or false negative in terms of is this a legitimate unemployment insurance claim? They've had to make some tough decisions. And in that, the trade-offs are you open the coffers and a lot of people and some people you don't want in come in.
A couple of before we jump into that. Wait, let me just see. So it looks like I just want to make sure that we're still connected because all right, it looks like we are. Cool. I just wanted to make sure because I look at it as a separate device and look like it went off for a second, but we're still kicking it strong. Um, Before we get into, you said a couple of terms. First term, um, the pandemic being the natural experiment. Is that what you said?
Yeah, that's from the economics coming out, the economics background, but we look for kind of these natural opportunities to test some theories, of how they will actually be applied in real world economic situations. So, we've had some instances back in American economy of gas shortages. Those have kind of been some natural experiments, but certainly, as we've heard, the pandemic itself is a 100-year event, and from economic terms, we would call that a natural experiment.
The next you said is Vulnerability entrepreneurs.
Yeah, that is my kind of term for scammers, hackers, fraudsters, that whatever
Oh
you
my
want to call them.
goodness. Listen, I don't know if that's been coined, but look, you should coin that, man. Vulnerability entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
I don't know why. Absolutely hilarious because like there's someone can you like literally imagine someone going for a job interview? It's like get some time here. Yeah, I was doing some vulnerability entrepreneurship around it. All right,
Yeah.
so yeah, just find that term funny. But in such a case, in jumping into it actually happened, right? Washington State.
Yes, unfortunately, Washington State, one of the first states hit with the effects of the pandemic, made the decision to kind of loosen restrictions for their unemployment process. Now, in all fairness to Washington State, I've seen some reports that their unemployment they were facing was at an unprecedented levels. About, I think I saw one report like about 15.3%. So that's a significant amount of the population that needs assistance, paying their bills, just being able to continue their way of life in some fashion. But they made some decisions which led to the coffers being open for the state-based unemployment benefits, but then you had a lot of the federal supplements that we still see are sticking around in some states. Some states have started to roll those back. I know Maryland, where I am, I think actually next month they're going to no longer provide the supplemental federal benefit that goes along with the state benefit. But nevertheless, in Washington State, um, a certain ring of vulnerability entrepreneurs found a vulnerability, submitted claims, unemployment insurance claims, even some from the actual State Department that handles the processing of these benefits. Some of their employees were victims of this scam and paid out these unemployment benefits, these fraudulent unemployment benefits, to the tune of net $350 million that is looking like it's going to be a loss to their state coffers as of right now.
And I mean, but rewinding, right? Initially, they lost 600 million, right?
Yes,
And it looks like they were able to recover 250 million, and that it brings their numbers down to around the 300 that you said. But initially it was a $600 million loss.
right.
It's
That's
insane.
a lot of money to go out
Significant.
the door
Huge.
quickly. Yeah.
Yeah, so so that it's interesting when you think about it, like because before this episode, it's not something that I actually thought too much about in terms of the amount of fraud that goes on with unemployment, and you know but then when you start thinking about it from a state perspective, I mean that's just the fraud from one side, but even for most states having legacy systems, that just opens you up to a whole other side of potential attacks. And
Right.
from taking advantage of from that, and like that looking at that attack vector, because once you have the legacy systems, it's just so many different points of entry, right? From legacy, what do you call it? From looking at it from like legacy protocols that you can get in if you have some username and passwords. It doesn't
Right.
even have multi-factor authentication and so forth. So it's that's very interesting. So what the current status right now is, they're currently investigating a way to get the 300 loss.
I I think the amount, unfortunately, is still being calculated it because they have to go back in their systems and figure out, hey, which one of these claims are actually fraudulent. How that's being received on the consumers is you have a lot of residents receiving these tax statements for benefits they never applied to in the first place. So the state is relying on the public to report these fraudulent incidents. So there's a lot still in flux. I know that their state auditor has a vested interest in looking at it from a policies procedures perspective and also getting a handle of the total loss.
We have a comment from our audience. Chicho K, vulnerability entrepreneur. That's what I'm taking. You and me both, my friend. I'm running with that. I don't know if I'm going to be saying, the attacker, yeah, I think that's going to be my, I think I'm going to run with it. You already here first. So, I think I'm running with it. I'm going to give credit to Medina, of course, when I talk through it, but, I'm going to be saying vulnerability entrepreneur from, henceforth. I'm going to have a couple of people looking at me like, giving me the look. Say to a client, you know what? Yeah, we're looking at you look like you were compromised. It definitely looks like, some vulnerability entrepreneurs took advantage of the situation. It's like, what are you talking about?
Well, these folks tend to be very smart, have very sophisticated tactics, very good at finding these vulnerabilities and capitalizing
Of
off of
course.
it.
Of course. I mean, if you even if we look at like what's going on right now with the total increase in ransomware attacks, right?
Yes.
How did they infiltrate that system? It could have been various vulnerabilities that were exploited for them to get access to the system to then launch this ransomware attack and lock down the system. I mean, from you're in Maryland, like I think Baltimore suffered from it a few years ago. We talked about that, and
Yes.
various other municipalities. So definitely, I mean, it's constantly looking for ways to exploit the system, and I think at times, I mean, even with the unemployment side, right? At times of chaos, at times of you have human beings being overworked. I think in the article that you sent me regarding the Washington State, it was a stat that they paid out 684% more money than the year before. So, you're now dealing with, obviously they're not going to the office. So we don't know if how their systems were even, if it was ready for remote work. We don't know what type of, if they were using, from a state perspective, once again, legacy applications that they're working remote. They are being rushed. They have a lot of overhead now, more so than they did previously. Communication then is down. So all of these are just right for, as you call them, vulnerability entrepreneurs to take advantage of this situation. Can we walk through the sequence of attacks? What I want to understand. So a particular actor or actor or vulnerability entrepreneur, they get access to all of these PII, confidential, personal identifiable information from the public. They then issue, and I'm just trying to go through it from my head. They now issue the unemployment claims, but they have to then put a bank account or an address. I would assume some sort of wire account where the money goes. That's
Right.
obviously not the real person. But then when the taxes are formed, like the actual person, they get information mailed to them. Can you walk me through that process? So like
Sure.
they're like, what's this? How does that work?
So the systems, and from what I can tell, a lot of state-based unemployment systems are legacy systems where you can submit claims online or you can call. Um, some of the ways that the data for their citizens are out there, and then you and I talked about this, is just any other compromise of another company or organization. For example, Geico recently sent letters to some of their policyholders indicating that you know their information was compromised, and in the letter they actually spell out how this can be used for false submissions of unemployment insurance benefits. So we all have a lot of our data out there. Big data is there. It's just a matter of connecting all the dots, which these vulnerability entrepreneurs did, submitted these false claims in the system, typically, and in the case of Washington State, they had a waiting period, but they dissolved that waiting period in the event of the material event that COVID is, in order to get those uninsurance payments out quicker. So, that it's going through the system. I'm sure the vulnerability entrepreneur was able to submit the claims. And you also have to remember, it's not necessarily that the claims have to be paid out at a financial institution. It can be issued on a credit or debit card and mailed. So it's easy to set up a PO box for a lot of those particular uninsurance employment cards to be sent to. It takes a lot, from somebody behind the scenes in that particular program for unemployment insurance to connect the dots. But in their haste to get the benefits out, they're solving a type problem and creating another.
Wow.
Yeah.
No, this is no, thank you for that walking through this sequence of events. I want to get now into the third person at the bar, the machine learning aspect.
Yes.
Can we talk through that?
Yeah. Let's do it. So you have these state-based unemployment systems that are in need of upgrades. So, of course, we want to upgrade to the latest and greatest artificial intelligence, machine learning capabilities. So, but what do you do when you have these fraudulent claims now in the system, and you want to develop this capability that will help automate this approval or disapproval process, but you have this compromised data? What if another vulnerability entrepreneur decided, hey, let me just circle back and try this again with some nuances? What if they wanted to try to, for instance, take this new capability that these state unemployment programs have developed and try to manipulate it in a certain way, so hey, we can get some more unemployment insurance benefits out of this? How do you protect a system like that when you already have data compromised within? How do you even identify that data, which in some cases tends to be very sparse, undetected even? But we do have instances now where we know this data is fraudulent, but these vulnerability entrepreneurs could take a step further and use that to their advantage.
So, well, I mean, it sounds like what you're getting into is more like potential adversarial attacks against some sort of machine learning model that's being put in place in these places. But it's something that actually like really happened, but without the actual vulnerability of entrepreneurs' involvement. It's more around the actual model itself was just inaccurate.
Correct.
You talked about that in terms of what happened in Michigan. I think it was from 2013 to 15 when they introduced um, the Michigan Integrated Data Automated System, MIDAS.
Midas, yes.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Uh, that story blew my mind.
Right.
Do you want
So,
to give like an overview to the audience about that story?
sure. So what happened was you had another state that had a legacy unemployment insurance benefit system. They decided they wanted to upgrade. So they brought this new system online. But in some respects may not have done a lot of the testing, a lot of the calibrating that you need to do that is necessary with, a machine learning capability for approval or disapproval. But they brought the system online, let it do its thing. And at first, it looked like it was doing as they expected, finding a lot of the instances of these undetected fraudulent claims, sending these notices out. In terms of policies and procedures, the state took what the output was from this capability, this minus system, as gospel. and didn't unfortunately do a lot of the necessary checks. So it looks to be that upwards of 34,000 claims that were marked as fraudulent were actually not. So Michigan had to kind of call back that capability and try to remedy the mess that this kind of uncalibrated and wild west, if you will, situation created by this new upgrade to their unemployment insurance system. And this is not even an adversarial attack. This is a legacy upgrade.
Yeah, I really want people to understand the weight of what happened to these 34,000 individuals. So essentially, these are people that just needed unemployment. They didn't do anything wrong. That the machine learning model that was used to help detect fraud falsely accused 34,000 people. What does that mean? So it's not as simple as, okay, I'm falsely accused, I didn't commit fraud. No, what do you call it? Like penalties were imposed on them.
Right.
It's like 400% penalty on the claimed amount for the fraud. I mean, people actually like lost their homes. They're saying that they experienced punishing personal trauma. They had to hire lawyers to defend themselves. They saw their credit and reputations ruined. Some filed for bankruptcy. Some had their houses foreclosed, and some were made homeless. So currently, it seems like Michigan is settling for 30 million in compensation for the falsely accused, although some are saying that it should be closer to 100 million given what they went through. So I mean, if you understand, right, if you're accused of fraud from a state, that's a correct me if I'm wrong, you would know more about this. That's a federal offense, I would assume, correct?
I believe so, or of that order.
Yeah.
But yes, you mentioned some of the penalties that we received. So some of these people who had actually probably found work later had their wages garnished. So it was kind of like a double hit that they received at the hands of the system that people just assume that the officials just assume was pumping out valid and correct information.
Because when the system was introduced, ironically, right, their cases of fraud dramatically increased. So they're thinking, wow, it's working extremely well, almost too well. So yeah, I mean that's crazy. What's this thing? After spending 20 on effort, they said they spent 44. Wait, hold up. It's a stat that I see here. They said that through efficiency gains, they were able to eliminate 400 workers, or a third of their agency staff. They spent 44 million, and it took 26 months of effort. They launched Midas and soon proclaimed a huge success, coming in under budget and on time, discovering previously missed fraudulent claims imposed. Yes, wow, that's and it looks like something similar happened in Australia with their Centrelink. So that's the look. I dedicated my entire career and academic life to technology. I'm a firm believer in it, but when it comes to things like this, I mean, the models have to be tested. You know what it reminds me of, in a sense, on another level. You ever watched the movie with Tom Cruise, Minority Report?
Yes, I have. Yes.
Yeah, I mean,
Yes.
it's when you did being falsely accused because of a machine learning model and it having adverse impacts on your life. I mean, it's definitely, it's devastating. And this story blew my mind. Like, even though I haven't heard about it until until this show and going through it. It's something that I found very interesting, though. But so can you explain your research now, what you're doing for your dissertation and your research, and how all of that comes together? Obviously, we talked about all three. So to all of those, we answered the question of what happened when all three of those guys or ladies or went to a bar the machine learning, unemployment, and fraud. I want to dive into like putting it all together. What do you see happening? What's your research about, and where are you taking this?
So this kind of flows from my first appearance on this show of trying to fit the fraud triangle to,
Remember that. Look at that.
CIA triangle. But you have a system which is complex, requires security, or as I've seen, in my research, they call it secure machine learning or versus adversarial machine learning attacks in this instance. But what I'm trying to do is develop a model that performs reasonably well, even when fraud is in the system, and even in the midst of a vulnerability entrepreneur introducing some adversarial poison data to make the machine learning model perform in a way beneficial to him or her. So using this case study out of COVID and the unemployment systems, I've I'm endeavoring to, do some surveys, capture the data of individuals, perhaps in Washington State or another state, who may have had one of those fraudulent claims submitted on their behalf, develop a model that would be indicative of machine learning capability, introduce these adversarial data points, and see how the model performs. Because we know this is coming, right? It's only a matter of time that somebody else is going to figure out another weakness in these systems. I'm just trying to do it so that we get ahead of that.
That's awesome. No, totally brilliant stuff. I mean, in looking at both of those case studies, right? You have one in which, obviously, machine learning was not applied, in the case of Washington State, and
Right.
you had what you call a vulnerability entrepreneur take advantage of that situation to the tune of 600 million, right? But then you have the other the total opposite side, in which proactively machine learning was applied. There was no type of nefarious actor involved, and 34,000 people were falsely accused of fraud. So it's really, as you start thinking through it now, it's like, okay, obviously getting the model right, thoroughly tested, um, is paramount. And then it's like, okay, now we introduce it. And then the second side of it is now, okay, once we have things in place, how do we now harden our system so that we
Yes.
could prevent potential adversarial attacks? And I want people to like, it's real cool because we have some graphics. So I want people to see something, some cool, some. Let me add it to the stream. What you're looking at right now, and we start talking about data, like, at the end of the day, machine learning uses data to answer questions. So you have to train your data, and the answering part around like the predictions, or you're making certain inferences. Are you going to get it 100% right? But the goal is to get the majority right, so you can reduce the human involvement, and over time you start training your system to get better at it as
Right.
but it was a couple of graphics here. So let's say we were trying to detect chihuahuas, for among different dogs, and you start to add blueberry muffin. So that really interesting stuff. A next one we have that is more of an adversarial attack is looking at a panda, right? You introduce some noise, right, intentionally, and now the model is thinking that this panda is a given, right? Obviously, it's still a panda, but 99.3% confidence. So if you think back to the Michigan, the Michigan study that we talked about, with a certain level of confidence, they falsely accused 34,000 people of fraud, and a real picture of a gibbon is this guy. Obviously looks nothing like a panda. So, but because a certain noise was introduced, like an attack, that's what it produced. So, wanted to share that. Found that very interesting.
Right. There's been some other instances that have come out, reporting or in the literature. I remember hearing one about cancer and radiology graphs, and how eventually the machine learning model was trained to look for, I think, a ruler to determine whether there was cancer present.
Interesting.
So, yeah, so the machine learning was actually ended up seeking rulers versus trying to find cancer or potential cancerous
Well,
tumors.
a ruler. Wow, I didn't hear about that one.
Yeah, yeah,
Not totally interesting stuff. I mean, it's aligned with some of the research that we're doing over at the university I'm in. So definitely interesting stuff. So looks like what so overall, no, definitely thank you for today. Thank you for
yeah.
giving
Thank
that
you.
overview. I, I like I said, I the connection was very interesting, you know, and these are stories that I didn't hear about until researching obviously for this show and talking with you. So I really appreciate you coming on and enlightening us on this and enlightening me on it and really like diving into the conversation.
Yeah,
So that's pretty awesome.
my
How can
pleasure.
how can people find you and also learn more about your work?
So definitely on LinkedIn is the best way. I'd love any insights, any comments. I love speaking to people in the industry as we're building these models, because I don't want to build have these ideas in a vacuum. Sharing is caring in a sense.
Really
But the answer to machine learning, fraud, and unemployment went into the bar. Who pays us as taxpayers? So let's work together and get ahead of this issue and
love
try to
that.
solve it together.
I love that. And that is the way you close a show on a Friday. Love that. I don't, matter of fact, I'm done. I don't think that's perfect. Perfect. I love that. I love that. Once again, thank you very much to all those tuning in. Thank you very much for watching. If you're going to watch it after the fact, a week from now, a month from now, a year from now, thank you for watching it at that time. Appreciate you immensely. All right. To all, have a great day. Have a great weekend.
Thanks. You as well.
All right. Cheers.